Alright, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Today we're going back to the year 1930, because in that year, a little boy named Schwarz Gigori was born in Budapest, Hungary. Now, I don't speak Hungarian, excuse me for butchering that name. I'm a West Virginian, not a Central European. But that boy would grow up to be George Soros, perhaps one of the most centered individuals in the epicenter of conspiracy theories, especially politically motivated conspiracy theories, not only in the United States of America, but throughout the entire world. So, what really is George Soros all about? And that's one of the things that I wanted to kind of tackle with this episode. I wanted to learn how exactly are these conspiracy theories attached to George Soros functioning, because it seems like if you were to turn on the television, anytime they would mention any sort of demonstration in the United States of America that involved the Democratic Party, people are going to say, hey, that was paid by George Soros. Those protesters were paid for by George Soros. And I wanted to know what exactly is going on, and furthermore, what is George Soros all about? And I hope you'll stay with me, because I find that there's actually something here that is way more valuable than what the cable news is leading you to believe about George Soros. First and foremost, it's like Soros describes himself as a financier, philanthropist, and philosopher. Listen to that last one, philosopher. He's saying that he has his own sort of philosophy that he's trying to export to the world. He's not trying to hide what's really going on. I mean, there is something that he's trying to market to the world, and there's a reason why I think that there's a certain genuine nature to it. Genuine only meaning that he isn't being deceptive with that. You know, some people put out things they don't genuinely believe. I would say that he's being somewhat genuine because of how, well, kind of materialistic it is. George Soros really was able to amass an enormous fortune by kind of benefiting from a major crash in the London stock market, the United Kingdom stock market, which really say it's not only about London, but the stock market crashed, and George Soros was able to profit to the tune of billions from that. It's very similar to what happened with Lord Rothschild in during the Napoleonic era. Perhaps you've heard of that one, where Rothschild was able to predict and also deceive the general public and make an enormous amount off of manipulating the stock market. But by Soros's own opinion, he didn't crash the market intentionally. The market crashed because of the economic climate. He just kind of led the charge. And this is something that you really see about George Soros. He learns how to manipulate things. What's the motivation for being so manipulative? Well, when I was listening to Walter Isaacson talk about his biography of Henry Kissinger, he mentioned that it was really the early years, like, you know, the childhood and the teenage years, that really modeled Henry Kissinger's personality, such as, like, you know, World War II, but also leading up to that. Jewish people were banned from the soccer stadiums, and Kissinger would sneak in to watch the soccer games, and then people would find out that he was Jewish and they would beat him up. And Walter Isaacson really attributed that to Henry Kissinger's sort of sense of, just his sense of might makes right, that you just have to have, you know, those who have the power get to control things. And even beside getting beaten up in a soccer stadium, the Nazis, I mean, about talking about might makes right, it was really just about overpowering whatever opposition is up against you. And there is a similar thing going on with George Soros. Once again, Kissinger and Soros are different people, but once again, something different is going on. And that would be that Soros was heavily influenced by his father. Once again, the youth, even up to the teenagers, are so influential on our personalities. But Soros was influenced by his father. And I was listening to some of his lectures from the Open Society Foundation, that's Soros's foundation, and he's saying this very clearly, that he was very impressed about how his father was the type of person who would not wait for the next catastrophe to happen. He would take action. And this is happening, you know, when Soros is a teenager, And his father's even relaying stories about trying to break out of a Soviet prison camp. And he's just like, he can't wait. He has to take action. He organizes a breakout, being proactive. Being proactive, standing up to the system, trying to learn how to dominate the system. Those are the things that Soros really received from his father in forms of education in a very subtle way. It's not those exact words, but that's the message that's been conveyed. And not to mention that they have things like changing their names to avoid being recognized as Jewish, not to mention all of the chaos in Europe with World War II. Once again, very, very influential on shaping someone's worldview. This leads us to kind of how Soros views the economic and financial world. He has an entire book out called The Alchemy of Finance, but that is one that I haven't read yet. But I was listening to him describe some of the things, in a series of interviews and lectures, and, he has his own foundation. He gave 5 lectures in a row. They're great things, all on YouTube, all for free. By great, I only mean that we can learn something. It's not that I think Soros is a good person. It's quite to the contrary, as we'll find out, because alchemy. What he says with alchemists, the alchemist wants to change the physical nature of something. Very famously, alchemists want to turn lead into gold, right? That's what alchemists are all about. I mean, lead is element number 82 and gold is 79, right? And they want to kind of manipulate the atomic structure through a series of experiments. And in any practical sense, even if you're actually to use sort of, atomic manipulation at this point, you wouldn't get any sort of practical result. That's what Soros is all about. You cannot manipulate physics like that. You cannot manipulate nature like that. But you can manipulate the markets like that. And obviously the political world, because you're really going to find that Soros is someone who does try to influence the political climate as well as the economic climate. The problem is, though, he's completely wrong. And you ever heard the expression that economics is an art, not a science? You've probably heard that in some variant at some point in your life. Economics is an art, not a science. Why do they say that? It's because economics has to add in a human social element. The word finance, the word financial, words like that are often attributed to just the numbers aspect of, the economy. But the word economics adds in the human social element. And what Soros is pretty much just saying is, don't care about that. He says this very clearly. He even will go to say that the investor does not have to care about any ethical consequences because all they're doing is watching the pluses and minuses. All they're doing is just watching what goes up and what goes down. They don't have any influence over what the company is deciding to do. They don't have any influence over the products that the company's making or how they're trying to sell them. It's like the investor doesn't have to care about that. And I will tell you, once you begin to view humanity in that way, that you can make massive, monumental decisions that affect people on a global proportion, but not care about the consequences, that is just fundamentally wrong. Because in short, what he's doing is trying to reduce humanity down to a series of just kind of numbers and statistics. And when you approach humanity as just a bunch of numbers and statistics, it is fundamentally wrong because human beings are not just numbers. It's like you have to account for morality and ethics and caring about something that is outside of yourself and not just the nerve endings in your body. And Kierkegaard talks about this very clearly, just like the aesthetic, just living to avoid pain. You have to get beyond that sphere of existence and get into the moral and ethical sphere. You have to care about these things just for the soul nature that you're dealing with the lives of countless individuals. And to not care about the consequences and only care about the pluses and minuses of your own gains, fundamentally wrong. And in many ways, that type of chaotic thinking is evil. Evil in the sense that it's chaotic and destructive. It's destructive without warrant. And most people would kind of equate that with being evil. So that's like one of the things about Soros and his thinking. He'll manipulate the economic climate and manipulate the political climate and not care about how it affects the populations. It's all about him, and it's all about increasing his own wealth and power, sphere of influence. It's all about just increasing George Soros. And that's kind of what we are dealing with. And I find that this is something that is horribly misrepresented by the mainstream media. Not that their job is to do things very well, but let's talk a little bit about the ways that Soros manipulates the political climate. Back in 2011, I was watching a lot of trash cable news television, and I would get it on YouTube. We're talking MSNBC and CNN and Fox News and a little bit of HLN, but mostly just for Robin Mead in the mornings. And it was like, when I would watch it on YouTube, 90% of the time, they would show a clip from MSNBC. It would be from Media Matters, a George Soros-backed political action group. And they don't even try to hide that. It's backed by Soros. They're massively distributing very select cherry-picked clips of MSNBC because, well, I mean, George Soros finds that that agenda is somewhat beneficial to him. And George Soros actually lost $1 billion from his net worth because Donald Trump was elected president, and I guess he went from $9 billion to $8 billion. Poor bastard. But it's like, he definitely is manipulating the political climate. This is the stuff that billionaires do. Haim Saban, the biggest contributor to Hillary Clinton's campaign, bigger than George Soros, absolutely, the biggest contributor to Hillary Clinton's campaign, said that very clearly. That's what you have to do for the political system. He puts out a 3-point plan to manipulate the political system, perhaps more bold than George Soros. And one of the reasons that I say that the interesting parts are overlooked and they're focusing in on things about George Soros aren't that relevant, because, I mean, Haim Saban has such a more detailed plan. 3 points. Acquire media networks, establish your own political think tanks, and contribute to political campaigns. Once again, he's a billionaire, the guy that created the Power Rangers and wrote the Heathcliff theme song, mind you. He's a billionaire, so he can do things like that, all right? But he has a 3-point plan out there to how this is how you influence the American political system. George Soros is a very similar guy, except instead of having a 3-point plan, George Soros has a 1-point plan. Do things that are good for George Soros, and just kind of like, then that's it. That's it. That's a 1-point plan. And he'll masquerade that he's a philanthropist, but in reality, Soros is someone who we just sort of said it right out like that. He does not want to manipulate the laws of physics and the laws of nature. He wants to manipulate the laws of humanity. And that is just absolutely dangerous. So says me. Once again, he's a billionaire. I am not. He is famous. I am not. But I would say that even though he has more than I do, what he is doing is just morally and ethically wrong. But this is something that you have to recognize. This has been done for centuries. Whether you're looking at somebody like Thomas Malthus, or you're looking at Ortiz from Venice, or even Frederick Winslow Taylor, who was all about, Henry Ford and the assembly line and stuff, how to make it work faster. He created the principles of scientific management, which reduces human beings down to statistics in an equation. Like, how do you get people to work faster? And they're just treated as statistics. It does not account for the human social elements, like what happens if your worker gets hurt or something like that. It's just like, it's not caring about things like that. It's just treating them as statistics. Fundamentally wrong, and George Soros is doing the exact same thing. Anytime someone tries to just use numbers and even logical reasoning, it's like, they're saying that that's all they need to try and predict what human beings are going to do and how they can benefit from other human beings. They are doing things that are atrocious because it does not account for the negative consequences that it has on the human population. George Soros has countless books out there. He has countless material out there, but I can't even begin to go through all of it. These are just the biggest points that I thought I would bring up. One thing I would say is that there are a lot of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories going on surrounding George Soros. This is not an anti-Semitic upload. Absolutely not. I mean, I just think that no matter who this guy is, what he's doing is wrong. I really believe that a lot of people are underestimating just how much anti-Semitic rhetoric is out there on YouTube. I mean, you just see countless people, particularly in the comments section, but a handful of them are actually posting their own uploads. I mean, it's just out of control, really. It's probably a lot of people are posting stuff very frequently, and they are the trolls that are spreading too much, but no, it really is underestimated. That's why I want to be very clear that, this has nothing to do with George Soros and his Jewish background. Not to mention that George Soros has even been described as an anti-Semitic Jew himself, someone who is against other Jews. I mean, that's just a kind of description that some people have given to him. I don't even have any comment on that right now because he is doing chaotic things to humanity only for his own selfishness because he is excessively materialistic, and he also has just figured out how to manipulate the markets and to manipulate the political system and doesn't care what happens to anyone other than himself. That is the ridiculous nature of what's going on here. And it doesn't matter what their background is. It doesn't matter that he was born in Hungary. It doesn't matter that he is Jewish. He is doing ridiculous things that are having very negative consequences on humanity because, he'll talk so much about like how he wants to be philanthropic, but the thing is, he doesn't want that. You can't have one and the same if you're going to have this system. Okay, this is how you manipulate the market to your advantage and don't care about the consequences and then say that you care about people. You can't just be like crashing markets and bankrupting people, and you can't just be trying to put out contaminants into human political thought and then say you don't care about the consequences, and then you're just going to give a speech in front of a bunch of people at the World Economic Forum and say that, oh yeah, but I care about people. No, you don't. You care about yourself. You care about one person, not other people. You care about your own selfishness. Once again, living to avoid pain without the moral and ethical sphere. And that's what I think is really happening with a lot of these George Soros theories. I think it's a lot of I think it's a little bit blown out of proportion that all the protesters for all the rallies are paid by Soros. There might be things that are genuinely connected to George Soros-backed organizations. I mean, Media Matters was one that deals with more with the media, but there's a whole list of things that have connections to George Soros funding. They might, but I mean, I'll tell you flat out, not all the protesters at the rallies, no matter what rally it is, are paid by Soros. You probably see them in your own social media feeds, whether it's the March for Our Lives or the Women's March, or the March for Science or the Tax March. You can see people in your social media feeds that are attending there that, there's people that you know personally that are very passionate about these causes. They are not paid by Soros. And those things are what the media really tries to go for. Anytime there's a demonstration, they say, oh, it was funded by Soros. Why don't they talk about how evil George Soros is as a person and try and present that angle? Why don't they talk about how he is someone who really just took on the art of carpe diem, and by art I mean that facetiously. He took on carpe diem because he learned that you have to be proactive as opposed to waiting for the climate to take its course. You have to take control of the political and economic climate before it takes its course. And to do so, you have to do some unethical and inhumane measures, but pretty much just not caring about what happens to anything else other than your own net worth and and the effects of the political climate are all tied to the net worth. George Soros comes from hedge funds. Hedge funds are just a series of interlocking interests within a single portfolio. That's what it's all about. That brings in the political climate issues. And a lot of people do this, though. You do have to recognize George Soros is not the only person who does this. It's just he does it on a very large scale. So that's kind of where we are. What do you have to say about anything I put forward about George Soros and the kind of evil nature that I have proposed? Do you think there's anything else going on with Soros? Like I said, countless books, countless presentations. He's been at this for decades. There's so much else that we could talk about, but I would love to hear from you. What do you think about this? And drop a comment below, and until next time.